For most people who have not traveled outside of their home country, money can seem like a daunting part of trip planning. It is, after all, a critical component for your trip, and you may have no knowledge about what are the best ways to buy certain items in different countries. In this video, we're going to cover some of the best options, from credit cards to mobile payment systems to cash, and talk about safeguarding your money and personal information while you're abroad. My name is Evan, and I work as a travel risk manager for a global organization that sends travelers all over the world. So the first part of this, we're going to talk about the use of credit cards. So depending on the location, credit cards are one of the best options for paying any sort of goods or service that you may encounter that you want to purchase while you're traveling outside the country. Credit cards have the benefit of being one of the more secure payment methods with built-in protections for any fraudulent activity on your account. So this prevents financial loss for any unknown charges to your account directly. If you do see an unknown charge, it's important to notify your credit card company right away, and usually they can just erase the charge and provide you a new credit card at that point. Travelers should be careful to use a travel credit card. So there are some credit cards that will charge you a foreign transaction fee. So if you're planning on using a credit card fairly extensively throughout an international trip, you want to ensure that there is no foreign transaction fee, as they can amount to 3% or even more, which could cost a significant amount over time, especially if you're there for more than a week. It's also important to realize that the two most universal credit card types are Visa and MasterCard. So things like Amex or Discover, which are fairly frequently used in the United States, may not be available in most countries that you may travel to. So just really stick with those two basic ones, Visa and MasterCard only. Some travel credit cards include protections for your trip. So I have a couple of those. It includes some protections for lost luggage during the trip, trip disruptions, which could be, weather delays, things like that. It also provides rental car insurance, which is really, really useful if you don't want to buy whatever the rental car company is offering in terms of insurance. And then the last part, some of them even cover emergency medical insurance too. So it's always important to look into those various options and pick a credit card out that is favorable to travel for you. One of the benefits of using a credit card in particular is that you're not carrying a big wad of cash around with you either. So it's a much more discreet method of payment. You're just pulling out, a physical piece of metal or a physical piece of plastic and using that on all those different purchases instead of having a big wad of cash. So people actually don't know, how much money you have available to you at that point. The only other thing I would mention is that credit card use is increasing across the globe, but there still are some locations that you'll find, the local population may not use credit cards nearly as much. So there are some places that I would always advocate for you to have some level of cash with you. And then the last thing I would mention on this too is if you're from a location where credit isn't widely available, credit cards may not be an option for you, which is unfortunate considering how useful they are, but there are some other options that we're going to speak about in just a moment. With that, let's jump to the use of debit cards. So debit cards, I would say you should use in a very sparing fashion, just because you don't want to run into a situation where you do have some kind of fraudulent charge and your bank decides not to reimburse you for it. One of the main ways that I use debit cards when I go on a particular trip would be to use ATMs to pull out local currency. So using the ATM is definitely beneficial for you upon arrival, just because you'll have that little bit of extra cash with you in case something comes up where you can't use a credit card for some reason. And then on top of that, you'll be able to get a better exchange rate overall. So oftentimes when you choose to withdraw money in the local currency, you'll find that your bank will do the conversion automatically and not add any extra charges to it that you would typically find at a foreign exchange service. One thing to note about ATM safety though, and this is something I harp about with all of my travelers extensively, is that you just want to make sure that you're being extra cautious with the ATM that you use. So ATM related crime is on the rise all over the globe. So that counts for the US, Europe, everywhere that you could imagine traveling to, ATM crime is a concern. There are a few tips that I always tell people during my pre-travel briefings to try to mitigate any of those unforeseen issues. So just make sure that you use ATMs that are in reputable locations always. Some of the best ATMs to use would be inside of a bank building because those are less likely to be tampered with and they're well monitored by the staff there. Another option could be inside the airport. This is a decent option because, again, it's fairly well monitored and frequently used. So if there is an issue, someone's likely to report it. And then the other place would be inside the hotel too. So most hotels will have some kind of ATM for you. And that would be, probably the sort of least best option in terms of, ATM use, just because inside the hotel, they're probably not watching it as much. So you just want to be careful about what that ATM looks like when you walk up to it. A couple other things to know: always block your PIN from you with your hand, right? People around you could view it, especially if there's a big line of people. But then we see a lot of cases in which someone may have installed a small camera just above the PIN pad so they can track what you're putting in. You should also be careful about the ATM looking tampered with. So if you see like the card slot is anyway broken or the PIN pad looks a little broken, there are ways to actually put something over the surface of both of those to take that information and then transmit it back to someone. And then all of a sudden your identity is stolen and your information for your debit card. That being said, I would say debit cards should be used pretty limitedly to take out money. I wouldn't recommend using it for all your transactions just because it doesn't have those purchase protections. And then make sure that whatever bank you have your debit card through isn't likely to charge you a bunch of excess fees, especially if you're withdrawing money. So I'm lucky that I have a regional bank that actually reimburses me for all of my ATM fees globally, which is great if you're a big international traveler. And then there are some other banks that do it as well. So just look out for that kind of thing when you're choosing a debit card and a checking account that would be best for international travel. The next thing we're going to talk about is cash. So the quote unquote cash is king, as the saying goes. It doesn't always hold true in most places anymore. So like I mentioned before, credit cards are very common. Many vendors are phasing out the use of cash and then using mobile payments or credit card transactions. That being said, it's always useful to have a small amount of local currency just in case you arrive at a location that doesn't accept credit cards, or for some reason, your credit cards are not working at a particular location. There are some travelers who exclusively rely on cash. So I wanted to just touch upon what are the pros and cons of that and what are some ways that you can keep your money safe. So as I mentioned before, probably the easiest way to bring cash with you would be withdrawing it from an ATM. The alternative is to bring some currency from whatever your home country is that you can convert at a foreign exchange location within that particular country that you're visiting. Just to note that foreign exchange kiosks, they're going to be widely available in international airports. And then there are companies too that you'll recognize, Western Union, other things like that, where you can do money orders, but also exchange cash as well. And then you should just note that, when you do exchange money at a foreign exchange center, you'll likely pay a much higher rate than just withdrawing it through your ATM. You also want to make sure that you're bringing in a currency that is pretty globally traded. So obviously the US dollar is the most common one. Definitely recommend that if you're going from a location that's not a commonly used currency, or also a euro, the British pound, things like that could be some options for you. One thing to note is that once you're changing money, unless you're doing it fairly frequently, on a daily, every 2-day kind of basis, you're going to end up with a large amount of cash. So here's a few tips so that you're not ending up losing your cash to criminals or just, losing it in general. Avoid carrying all your cash on your person. So I'd say most hotels have some kind of safe. If you are carrying a large amount of cash, take whatever you need for that particular moment outside and leave the rest of it somewhere within the hotel safe, just to make sure that you're not going to end up losing that money or having it stolen from you. No matter what it is, whether it be cash or maybe even your phone or your wallet, never keep it in your back pocket. Pickpockets are experts and they can grab items out of your back pocket without you even knowing. In addition, your best bet is really your front pocket, but also even better, you can have it hidden in a jacket. Or the other option, which is probably the most safe in terms of carrying cash, is a money belt. So a lot of people are familiar with money belts for travel specifically, but they basically fit inside of your clothes and carry any of your cash or valuables that you need to bring with you. It's unlikely that a pickpocket's going to try to get down into your pants to actually take the money from you. They want something that's going to be relatively easy so they don't get discovered. You should also watch signs for pickpockets as well for any location you're visiting. So popular scams for pickpockets are pretty easy to find by just doing some kind of Google search. And that varies from location to location, but in Europe you see these scams where people come up and ask for your signature on some kind of petition, and then while you're doing that, someone comes up behind you and pickpockets something out of your pocket, for example. Definitely use your head. If someone comes up to you and if you believe that they have some kind of negative intentions, or it seems too good to be true, or you feel like they're getting too close to you, or there's too many people, any of those kind of things, trust your gut on that one, but also use your head. Use a firm voice. Make a scene. They don't want a big scene. They don't want to be discovered. They don't want the police to come after them. So in general, a pickpocket's going to run away in those kind of circumstances. Also enlist local help. Ask help from locals. Sometimes there's a language barrier issue, but oftentimes people are very, very willing to help you if you're running into a situation like that. And then if you're in a public space or a market or a shop, anything like that, if you notice that they have CCTV cameras up, it's also a great way to point that out to any potential pickpocket or someone who's trying to steal money from you, that they're directly on camera. So oftentimes that will dissuade them as well. The last payment system we're going to mention, I won't get too far into this, but it's in relation to mobile payments apps. So in the US, everybody kind of knows Apple Pay, the Android equivalent. But there are some countries where mobile payment systems have become so popular that they become the primary way people pay for things, right? So some examples are Alipay or WeChat Pay in China, M-Pesa in Kenya. Some of those, they'll usually require a local number for you, so it can be a little bit difficult for someone who's traveling internationally to arrive there and then, not know how to use that mobile payment system in that particular location. In general, like credit cards, those systems are relatively safe, but just to note, in terms of some of the countries that may use them, I'm talking about China in particular, there are some pretty robust monitoring systems, so you should assume that whatever technology you bring with you, whatever transactions you're making, is collected and very, very much accessible by whatever that local government is. So that's just a basic rundown of that in conclusion. There are many ways you can pay for things when you're traveling, but not all of them are created equal and not all of them are safe. So you just want to make sure that you're picking a way that's going to be suitable for the destination you're going to, for your own personal circumstances, but also to make sure that you're not going to end up losing your money while you're abroad. Make sure you're always careful with your money and personal information to avoid any sort of unforeseen circumstances on the trip. And like I mentioned, it's important to research your options beforehand. Again, that's one of the main takeaways. Research before you go, and then just make sure you notify, your credit card company or your debit card holder, just to make sure that your money will be accessible while you're there. Anyway, that's the video in total. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, you can put it down below. More videos are on the way, so keep an eye out. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.